to another edition of Zero Block 30. Today is going to be a super special edition. We're going to have Zach and Tom Schueman, who are part of the book you see right here. It's called Always Faithful. They talk about their story of Afghanistan, the adventures that they have, and I don't want to say adventures, but the horrific events that they experienced in 3-5 and how they overcame that and how Zach came to America. And all that is going to be brought to you by our good friends at WhistlePig. You're going to see us drinking it throughout the whole show. Luckily, because I can't get through it. If you look at my eyes right now, they're a little bit tear-stained because I'm a pussy. But I am a pussy that is drinking WhistlePig Piggyback Rye. If you haven't tried it yet, it is absolutely delicious. It is 100% rye. It's 96.5% proof. Try it out. It's absolutely wonderful. They're our presenting partner. Check it out. Pickleback by WhistlePig. Unbelievable. All right, now in Zero Block 30, I'm privileged. I'm so excited to do this. It feels like it's a year or something in the running. It's been a long time. One, I'm glad to meet Tom in person. I'm glad he's here. And obviously, Zach is here too. So we're here to talk about, I guess it was a year ago, almost a year ago, that after the withdrawal in Afghanistan, you guys were one of the main stories that came out that was essentially a feel-good people story after the result was done. I'm sure it didn't feel that way at the time, but seeing the success of Zach and his family coming to America, it felt like a success story, but things don't happen easily as when the government is concerned, especially when you're talking about war and things like that. But in order to set the scene, Tom, I wanted to talk to you about your deployment to Afghanistan, your first deployment to Afghanistan, and some of those things that entailed, because I really feel like without those experiences, this bond that you formed with Zach enough to make a book called Always Faithful does not happen. It simply does not happen without that form of relationship. So for the people that aren't familiar with the Afghanistan, the war in Afghanistan and how things went down, can you kind of give us what the ground felt like when you first pulled into Afghanistan?
Yeah, sure. First,
pretty dusty, I would say.
Moon dust. If you haven't stepped in moon dust, it's like walking around in baby powder. I will say that the first time we met actually was in Las Vegas, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So good to see you again, and also just really want to express my gratitude to the ZBT team as early supporters of this story. You know, last year, before a lot of the media was picking us up, you were advocating for us, so I just appreciate that. Feel good story. Did not feel so good for most of it. It had.
Honest to God, whenever I said it and I saw the reaction in your faces, I felt like a fucking asshole.
Yeah.
I just said it.
A lot of not feeling good.
Yeah. So that was like the interesting thing, that people viewed our story as a success story, and it's like it's mostly a failure story with a little glimmer of success at the end. What kind of secured this bond or kind of formed it, and so saying it in 2010, October 2010 was the most lethal place on earth. It was the heaviest fighting, and it was the heaviest fighting of the global war on terror, and so it's kind of interesting that in the longest war in American history, we were in the deadliest battle. I'm always careful to closely follow that with because some people kind of use that as a badge of honor, that 25 killed, 250 wounded, and people will start to feel bad, and I want to make sure that it's really a story of us killing a lot of Taliban, a battle that we won, a battle that we undoubtedly, for every Marine that was killed, 10 Taliban were killed, and so the Marines at 3-5 are not to be pitied. They were
I fucking love it.
Were warriors. Just go ahead and pop it, send it, and so there are Marines that are keeping with our history, that fight and win battles. And so it was a tough battle, no doubt. I kind of always, to frame it, my first patrol, I had 96 Marines, and we weren't halfway out of the patrol base, and we were in a complex ambush. Wow. So I still had half my platoon in the base. This was my first time leading a patrol, and we had a hidden ID, and we were being shot at from two different positions. Like, that is a good way to kind of say, like, that was what Sangin was like.
Yeah. Welcome to Sangin. That was...
So, I don't think we could just skip through that. So at that time, how old were you? I imagine 24, 25?
23.
23. My fucking God. So you're 23 years old, and that happens. And as a 23-year-old, first lieutenant, second lieutenant?
I just been promoted to first lieutenant.
So first lieutenant, 23-year-old first lieutenant, you have people coming out. What is your initial reaction? And did your training kicked in, or was it something different?
I will tell you that infantry officer course prepares its infantry officers, I think, very well. I also think that our pre-deployment training prepared us very well. That ultimately Marine Corps training, you're ready to do your job. Mm-hmm. And there are many things that will emerge during a deployment that no amount of training can prepare you for. Mm-hmm. One time I had a Marine that was a triple amputee, and one of my Marines brought me his fingers, and he no longer had an arm. Mm-hmm. It's like, what do you do when somebody hands you some fingers when that person's put them in my cargo pocket? And I'm like, what am I doing? Why do I have these fingers in my cargo pocket? Like, so there are some. I have probably 4 or 5 kind of scenarios as a lieutenant in combat where there just was no amount of training that can kind of prepare you for that. But I do think that ultimately very much prepared to fight. And so I was trying to move up towards where the IED was, the corn in Afghanistan at the time. And this is kind of another thing that I never experienced, at least in all my training, is that the corn was overhead. The corn was like 9-10 feet tall. Mm-hmm. And you were blind 1 foot in front of you. You could not see and so it was kind of always really sketchy and scary that you were going to lose the person ahead of you, and that would be a very bad place to be lost.
Everyone picture it's the fall, you're in a corn maze, but you're being shot at, and there are bombs going off, and you have to keep track of all your buddies. It's
and if you get separated from your buddies, you probably will get decapitated. So that was a little added pressure about really not
that seems
wanting
a little
to get
more
separated.
Mm-hmm.
But I was trying to get up there. As I was trying to move up, I came to a break between 2 cornfields as I went to bound across those two, that open danger area, as we refer to it, right? And a PKM just started to hammer down on me. Died behind some poppy that's drying, which provides concealment but not cover.
That's
right.
And so the bullets,
we got an infantry officer, folks,
are still ripping through the poppy, and I turn. I'm there with the platoon commander that I'm replacing, and one of my machine gun section leaders there, Corporal Nykirk, he had an M4 with a 203, and I said, I'm going to stand, I'm going to suppress that window, and you're going to shoot a 40 mic round. Are you ready? I'm standing. And so I start suppressing. We shoot a 40 mic round into the window. He does. We're good. We push through to the next cornfield, and that the lieutenant from 3-7 who we were ripping out grabs me and says, Lieutenant Schueman, now that you've got your car, make a decision. I was like, the decision was to not die, because so he's like.
So for the civilians listeners listening, that the car is a combat action ribbon. So it's, I believe that's the single most sought after medal or ribbon in the Marine Corps.
Sure.
I think that's what everybody, when you go in,
it's
you want to
have.
It's a big time validator,
it's right?
Medal, it's like, all right, you've seen some things.
I think it is the street credit ribbon.
And he's basically saying, all right, you popped your cherry, now what?
Yeah. And so one. To me, I think the car should be like a deli ticket where it's kind of running ticker, because not all
cars are related
equal.
Yeah.
No, not even close.
But generally,
same thing with Purple Hearts.
But my thought to him was like, dude, I am 5 minutes into my first patrol. Although everybody brings the valid points. Before I deployed, that was something that was very much I was insecure about. It was on my mind. Okay, so I'm not gonna act like I was too cool and I didn't care about a car. I wanted a car.
Yeah.
In that moment, it wasn't like, man, I hope I get my car sometime during this deployment. It's like, dude, the car was it was coming.
That's what you. That's what you talk about whenever you're smoking cigarettes with people. Oh, yeah, the car is gonna come.
We stopped in that next cornfield, and I started to hear mortars go off, and I'm like, no one approved mortars or sent me a report that we're shooting mortars. There's helicopters flying around. We're going to shoot a helicopter out of the sky with a mortar. And then I heard my snipers engaging. Then my squad leader, Sergeant Decker, comes to me and says, Sir, Teague just shot a guy. And I'm like, well, one, who's firing mortars? You can't do that without us getting clearance. Snipers, who are you shooting? And Sergeant Decker, did the guy that Teague shot have a gun? And he's like, yes. And I was like, killing is authorized.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like a very weird moment to think that we are now in the business of killing and it's good to go. Like, and so like that was kind of,
and not just good to go, fucking encouraged
very much
and applauded.
Yeah. So we get into the first compound that we were trying to set up a patrol base because we're on this like 3 or 4 day op, and a grenade comes over the wall. And so the drill is when you throw a grenade, it's frag out. But when a grenade comes in, you say grenade, 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 to let everyone know this is not a friendly one. And the fact that within the first, like no shit, the grenade came over the wall, and I was the one yelling grenade and diving away from the grenade. And I'm like, how the hell did someone get through our lines to that they could just throw a grenade over the wall? I don't know where all my people are. I don't know why we're shooting mortars. It was so I am trained for all these things, but the friction and complexity, the battle tracking.
But emotionally, where were you at? Because I can't imagine that's an easy thing where you have to internalize your emotions, understand where your Marines are at, get a lay of the land, and continue to command at that point, when you're probably at your most nervous point you've ever been in your life at that point.
So, the ability to compartmentalize is, I think, probably the most critical role of the leader. In Fields of Fire, Pressfield writes about Dionysius, the platoon commander, and that's this idea of self-composure, and that when the troops don't want to go, you got to push them, and when the troops are going to complete blind rage, you got to pull them back. And so this idea of if combat is this entropy or this chaos, you have to be the homeostasis, right? You have to be the equanimity in the storm, that you bring all this shit is going, and you have to be, because your troops are looking to you, and as cliche as it is, what now, Lieutenant? It's fucking real. They're looking to you for a sign. Are we okay? Or are we not okay?
Yeah, and how much, you mentioned one of your NCOs' names.
Yeah.
How much of a factor are your NCOs playing in this moment, and what sort of relationship did you have with them leading up to the deployment, all your pre-deployment training, and how did they impact the overall day?
Sure. And as a commander, you are always either instilling additional confidence that the situation, or you're detracting from that, right? And so no matter how you're feeling, and that's the thing, as a commander, you can feel whatever you want to feel on the inside. Like, this is not good, this is pretty bad, but you always have to be able to outwardly appear that
stoicism is important.
This is no problem. I will say that I was out on a patrol when my best friend, who's a 3rd platoon commander, got hit, and a call came in. They were urgent medevac. He'd missing a leg. And when I got back to the patrol base, I was sharing that patrol base with the 2nd platoon. I was 1st platoon commander, and the 2nd platoon commander, Will Donnelly, met me at the gate and said, I don't think our Cam's going to make it. Will ended up being killed on the Battle of Thanksgiving. So about 2 months later, Will was killed. And I went and I debriefed with my platoon. And after I debriefed with my platoon, we had just sustained significant mass casualties like the day before. This was 2 weeks into the deployment, and we were like at 12, 13 killed in action, 40, 50 casualties. And I'm just thinking, like, no one's going to make it. Like, at the rate we're taking casualties. And so the only place that I could be away from everybody was the detention facility. We didn't have anybody in the DETFAC, which was really just a HESCO little box that we had. And I went there, and I had this really thinking about Cam, and he was this kind of John Wayne figure, this larger than life figure, and thinking like he's not going to make it, and I don't know if he's not going to make it. I mean, none of us. And then I found myself, I don't like remember what happened, but I know that at some point I was laying face down in the moon dust.
Yeah.
Weeping, I pick myself up. I go into my little mud hut, and I had, in the bottom of my ruck, I had packed away a Snickers bar. And I said, there's going to be a rainy day where you're going to need a morale boost.
Hungry, why wait?
Yeah, why wait? And so I packed this little morale treat away with some good fortuitous foresight. And I did not think a week and a half into deployment is when I'd already be
You thought that guy was going to last a little longer.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I open up my pack, and I immediately see I've had some visitors. And as I start to kind of pull aside some of my gear, there's just piss, shit, blood, and a pack of Taliban rats had been living in my ruck.
Yep.
I get to the bottom of my ruck, Snickers bars fucking gone.
Oh, no.
And that was the last ounce of resilience that I had.
Yeah.
And it was, and so like at that point, I broke down and became physically ill. It was like, it was this insider attack. It's like, okay, the Taliban hit my best friend. That's really hard for me to kind of, and it's like, but I'm in friendly lines right now, and now these little blue on blue bastards just got the last bit of, and I know shit like puking, sick for 24 hours, feverish, delusional, delirious.
Yeah.
But when I came back from that, I said, you got Marines to lead. Like, you can't be having episodes.
And again, I keep going back to, like, you're 23, you know? Like, that keeps putting it into focus. Like,
I've said on the show
23 years
before, it's
old.
kind of crazy. They put us in that position. 23 years old, no combat experience. And it's like, hey, here, you're responsible for all these lives. And make sure you make all the right decisions. And don't get anyone hurt.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
I mean, because there's one aspect that, and I know you're not brushing by it, but these memories are so traumatic in a lot of ways. Being 23 years old and seeing somebody who becomes a triple amputee. Like, you can do as much training as you want to with pigs, raccoons, whatever the fuck you want to do. But whenever it's one of your Marines, I'll never forget the first time that I saw a person that I worked with when they were shot and what that looks like. I can't imagine what it was like to be in command and do that.
And for the most part, I was able to successfully. There's another great line in Gates of Fire where it talks about how the Spartans would, before they'd go into battle, they'd break their bracelet, and it was kind of like the modern day dog tag, where they put half the bracelet in a basket and then they retain half the bracelet on their person, so that if they got too many spears to the face, you can match up the bracelet and say. But it was more than just a literal meaning. There was a symbolic meaning in that I'm putting my humanity in that bracelet because I'm about to literally go do the phalanx and
again, compartmentalize. It was like a way to.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so a lot of warrior cultures have much better rituals than we do. Like, we don't have those type of rituals and then it's like the Spartans had a Xiphos sword. It's a short sword, and it was used so that they can get closer and stab you in the guts, right? And so if I'm a dad and I got a 3-year-old daughter and I'm about to go stab somebody in the guts, it's hard to do that if I'm still feeling like I'm a dad with a little. But if I am separating from my humanity, but the thing with when the Spartans, when they were done with battle, they had this fear shedding thing, where they would all kind of huddle together and the men would weep and cry and puke, and it was like accepted as they reattached their humanity. And also their battles lasted a day, 2 days, not 6 months, 9 months, a year. And there was when you talk about how it could still pierce you with Justin Mcleod, the guy who was a triple amp that I kind of talked about, where one of my Marines gave me his fingers. I had convinced him to extend on that deployment. He was going to EAS. He had enlisted in 2008. He had a baseball scholarship to go play college baseball. He said, no, I want to go serve my country. And so he had done Fallujah, then he'd done the 31st MU. And then he'd done our workup, and he had a son, and right before we deployed, and he said, sir, I was going to extend my wife, got this baby Desmond. I think I'm gonna go ahead and EAS. And I said, Mcleod, you're my DM, designated marksman. You're my top land nav guy. Do what you need to do, but just know, like, we need you too. And he came back the next day and said, sir, you're my family too. Just 2 months later, I've got Mcleod's hand in my cargo pocket, and he was still very calm throughout much of this. The engineer had stepped on the pressure plate. Mcleod was over the charge, and I first gave all head with my frog top on, and I gave my cami blouse, my frog top blouse. The engineer was going into shock, and I wrapped him up in my blouse, and then I went back to Mcleod, and he was smoking a cigarette. He was kind of cool, but we had a really hard time landing the helicopter because it was dusk. And so no matter what mark we were putting out, they couldn't see the mark. They couldn't see the smoke. They couldn't see we put a loom on the deck. They couldn't see our mark.
Which I imagine is the most unbelievably frustrating thing.
And so they had a really hard time tailing the mark. And then as they came in, the tail bent and they waved off. And so at some point, it was very clear, like, Mcleod is dying. And I'm having this conversation with him, and I'm like, hey man, you gotta stay here, because you had a dream, a goal of teaching your son how to play baseball. You're gonna be his little league coach. And like in that moment, all I want to do is break down and cry.
Yeah,
I'm looking at this man who I love, who I feel personally responsible for being there, who I know will not be playing catch with his son, and I'm trying to help him find the will to live. And like I said, there's a couple of those moments. They were rare, but there's a couple of those moments where no amount of training, and so talking about compartmentalizing, it was like fighting, holding that back in that moment where all I wanted to do was cry for Justin Mcleod and his son Desmond. Those were the moments that was really tested. When on December 28th, Corporal Tevin Nguyen was killed. He was the third Marine killed in my platoon. And we went to where the IED was initiated, and he was killed by a remote control IED. And we went into that compound. There's a military-age male with some teenage sons, and Tevin was like very well loved within the platoon. And we say, we know that you didn't initiate the ID because we saw the guy, but we know he was here. And the same thing you'd always get in saying was, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just a farmer. And I'm just a farmer. There's no Taliban here. I'm just a farmer. And I'm like, no, motherfucker. And this,
they can hide their guns or stuff somewhere, and then we're not Taliban.
Right.
Yeah,
like, oh, okay. Yeah.
So you gotta
it's like there's
Yeah.
fucking brass on your roof. And my Marines were not having any of it. It was going to be blood for blood. The only thing that
and
was.
how hard is that to be an officer in that moment? Because for a fact, like once one of your fellow Marines is killed, there is almost like this ruthlessness that arises in a platoon or in a company. And as the commander, it's your responsibility to quell that and bring back discipline. When you're 23 years old, you're talking to somebody who you convinced to go over there again. You want blood too, I'm sure. How difficult is that to fight your internal nature versus what your responsibility is as a Marine officer?
Yeah, the only thing that will satiate that desire for a blood offering is blood, is blood for blood,
right?
And to step into that chasm, to step into that gap between what is likely to happen if nature runs its course, but as you're alluding to, I'm just as angry,
right?
Like I loved Corporal Tevin Nguyen. and I want to fucking kill these little Taliban bastards. And by the way, 10 minutes ago, I could have killed them.
Yeah.
Because they had their guns and they were doing Taliban stuff. Mm-hmm. And now because of the ROE, I can't kill them.
Your hands are tied.
And so it's like, these are Taliban as Taliban can be, but it would be considered murder if we killed them right now.
It actually wasn't his leadership that stopped him. It was knowing all the meetings and stuff he'd have to sit through if he did do something
all the
wrong.
Paperwork.
It was the paperwork ultimately,
Yes.
Marine Corps paperwork
Kate,
that stopped
you
him.
are actually on to what stopped it.
Yeah.
I used to tell this vignette. I taught at the Naval Academy. I used to kind of tell this as a kind of like, we have to maintain the moral high ground.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how I used to frame this. And that sounds nice. Like, people like that. It's like, oh, yeah, we've got to be better. And we couldn't kill them because someday you might have to look inside your heart and you'd feel... And
yeah,
it's like,
that's fucking stupid. You want to kill them because they killed your buddy. Like,
yeah,
they killed somebody
and
that
so
you
like
love.
that. But that's that, like... But saying that we're going to maintain
You
the
can't
moral...
say that out loud.
It sounds like... It sounds really nice.
Yeah.
Sounds officer-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's probably why I don't like it.
And so it's like, but all the people that we killed, I don't ever feel bad about that.
Right.
I don't think like, oh man, it's like, I just think like there's probably more people that should have been killed.
I wrote a blog that talked about the day I got shot, and I wrote, I will never apologize if that guy is dead.
Yeah.
Like,
But
that's
also,
just the way it goes.
What's tough is full well those people that were trying to kill you, they have no idea what the Geneva Conventions is. They don't care if you were holding a weapon or not. They were going to try to kill you come hell or high water. So to try to make sense of that and try to maintain that moral high ground when you know your opponent won't is very difficult.
Yeah, and the entire, like, the weapon of choice in Singing was the IED, which is not at all within this indiscriminatory weapon that was blowing up kids and children and all kinds. And so, like, yes, they did not adhere to that. The truthful version of that story is, back to Kate's point, is like, we didn't kill them because I don't want to go to jail.
Right.
Then it's mission over for you guys, and you can never have a chance to do what you want to do again.
Right.
You're screwed.
And so, like, that's truly why we didn't kill them that day. And when people say, people will think like, oh, how does a Haditha happen? How does a My Lai happen? It's like, oh, I fucking know.
Yeah.
Like, I know how a Haditha or My Lai happens. It's you need leadership.
If you've seen violence, you're prepared to do it.
And there's this book called Black Hearts, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with. And people love Black Hearts, and I know I'm going to receive some criticism for this, but like, to me, Black Hearts is a book about an army unit in Iraq, and it's a book about when there's no leadership, bad shit's gonna happen with 18-year-olds with guns.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
It's like, and so it is in those moments that you as an officer earn your pay.
Yeah.
When you step in between what is bound to happen, it's when that guy landed the helicopter at My Lai and said, we can't fucking keep killing these kids. Like, what are you doing, right?
Yeah.
It's that moment where officers earn their pay, where you have to step in between that thing and say, I understand how you're feeling. I actually feel that same way, but we can't do this thing.
And that was going to be my question. How do you, as the leader, validate the feeling? Because it's like when you see somebody that you know and you work with and they're killed or they're severely wounded, it is the most normal, natural human response to want to do great violence with swift intensity to the people that cause that harm. And I think being put in as, again, 23 years old, being able to be that levy in the heat of one of the biggest storms that you'll ever battle in your life is an incredibly difficult position. And that's what you were facing in Afghanistan at the time. Zach, I want to transition a little bit to you, because Tom went there, signed up, knowing exactly full well what was going to go on in Afghanistan. You being from Afghanistan and knowing what the Taliban was capable of, How was that for you, and why did you decide ultimately to become an interpreter for what was the occupying forces? All right, we need to take a quick stop in the show to remind you to go to our sponsor, Rocky Boots. Without Rocky Boots, this show absolutely doesn't happen. They have all kinds of boots. They are Barry compliant, so if you're a Marine, like those that are listening because we have Killzone on, if you're a Marine, they are Barry compliant, so they are approved by 1028 Golf, I believe, or maybe it's Foxtrot at this point. Whenever I was in, it's 1020.38 Golf, but I think it's actually either Hotel or India maybe by now. Whatever it is, the uniform regulations, make sure you go with Rocky Boots. They are fantastic. They're going to stop your ankles from rolling. They're going to be super comfortable if you're doing humping, if you're doing anything military related, or if you're just doing some shop stuff, or if you're a nurse, or if you're a first responder. They have the boots for you. They have whatever you need, even traditional type of sneakers with a steel toe. They have that as well. All you have to do is go to rockyboots.com, enter the promo code ZBT at checkout. You're going to receive 25% off. We had the first real payday of August soon, so you should have some money in your pocket still. Make sure you go to Rocky Boots and make sure it goes all the way. That's rockyboots.com, enter the promo code ZBT for 25% off.
Yeah, the main purpose of my interpreter's job to help our American partners, the U.S. government, and also establish our government, because they take all the rule to the Afghanistan Islamic Republic government, and we were like Taliban time. There was no school. No modern education, and that's why I think about it. The Americans is here, and they're working together with us, and they want to build our country. When American comes, we have schools for the girls, for the kids, for the high schools. We got nice buildings. We got very good educations, like science, biology, and history, everything, English courses and schools. That's why I think for our future, and also we work for the whole world peace, to debate the terrorism, the people who make violence. We fight against them.
And how long were the Americans in Afghanistan before you decided that you wanted to be an interpreter?
They were the American. They get to Afghanistan in 2001, and I was little at that time, about 11 years old, and we had a camp next to in our village.
And how old are you now?
I'm 32. It's a long time.
Yeah, it is.
And there was a pub. It's called Pub Right in our village. It's about 10 minutes walk away from our house. And when the American just landed there, the people say, "Oh, some people come. They have different uniforms, guns, and stuff like that. They have a helmet like."
Some good shit, yeah.
What it called, like, our people scared, Nobody go there to talk to them, who they are, and the kids witness the Humvees and the trucks, the military trucks of American troops. They all just escape, they just hide, they're gonna shoot.
Understandable, yeah.
But at the time, we just familiar with them. We saw them. They work for us. They come to the village, help people, and give the children books, notebooks, pencils.
Yeah.
And then we thought we're gonna help these people.
Yeah.
Because they are work for us, for our country. And then we decided to learn English, and sometimes we go to the pub and talk to Americans,
Yeah.
They give us candies, pencil, notebooks, books. The little books for stories, different stories on it. And
So-
then we got we make friendship. We help them, you know. They had oopies in the mountain. My province is all mountain, like very green jungles and mountain. There has oopies around the pub in the mountain. We carried bags with them, and we just start learning English and talking to them, conversation with them, and also going to follow the English courses. And then slowly we learn, and then 2010 I was working in another pub. It's called Pub Krongle. It was very dangerous place.
Using Korangal.
Yeah, Krongle.
Yeah.
And I was there with a construction company. This is they work for the U.S. Government. They want to make some buildings inside the pub, and we were there and just working on that.
Say what else happened during that time?
Yeah, and that was very dangerous place.
Right, Korangal, it's where Restrepo, and it's where
so if
people
you've seen
will
any
know
of the
that.
documentary of Korangal and Restrepo,
Infamously
right?
dangerous.
YouTube, you see the videos.
Right.
It was very, very dangerous
Yes.
place.
What happened to you there?
Just I was like poor man.
Okay.
And for that company where I work with it, and so someday a day we went to get some rocks because this is very dangerous place.
Yeah.
People don't use the sheetrock and these stuff. It's all rocks because bomb and rockets,
wow.
RPG.
Yeah.
One day, one of our driver, he worked for our company. He told me to go with me, just because you spend a lot of time here, you're gonna get bored, you know. Then I just hopped in the truck and to get some rocks. There was labor they digging out the rocks from the mount, and the driver just pick it up and bring it to the pub. And I just go with them and to see the laborers and also just make myself refresh, you know.
Yeah.
And the Taliban just put ID in the road. This is mount. There was mounts and the water stream come out of it, and the rain was making some water, and the Taliban put ID in that water in the road.
Yeah.
And it just blew up. And the trucks it's all gone, but fortunately the seat was good. We just we were good. The Americans come and they didn't imagine it.
So
What's
you
happened
get
to the
blown
car?
up in Korangal.
Yeah.
And then you wind up in Sangin.
Yeah.
How lucky are you?
I mean, honest to God, like I don't think
nobody imagined it because the car it was turned to the pieces and
Yeah. And
I don't think people
we was
like the average person who listens to stories from Iraq and Afghanistan both, I don't feel like we ever really do justice to what interpreters see and what they've experienced and what they've done. Like, for example, the guy that I was with, Kyle, he when I got there, we came around. I was telling Tom this before we came in. We came around a corner, and it was whenever they were using cell phones to trigger IEDs. We came around the corner. You see the cell phone turn on. Immediately, Kyle starts sprinting with his AK-47, wearing fucking flip-flops, essentially, like Crocs, legit, with the four-wheel drive mode, obviously, with the little strap on the back.
Yes.
So he takes off and kicks this dude straight in the face, and he's like, "You mother..." And he's screaming at the guy. I don't think people realize and Kyle had gotten shot 4 times in 3 separate incidences. So he'd been through some stuff. Tom, can you talk a little bit about how vital the interpreter is? Because if you just think that, if you're listening, you think this is just somebody who translates languages, you're missing the entire point. Without the interpreter, we simply do not succeed in any way in Iraq or Afghanistan.
Yeah, so when Zach's truck got blown up, the only thing that was left was the cab where they were sitting. The engine was blown out. The back end of the truck was blown out. When the Army guy showed up, they said, like, we don't know how you're alive.
Wow.
It's crazy.
And so Zach goes from the most dangerous place to then the next most dangerous place.
And your wife must think you're an insane person.
Yeah. Like, what is he doing?
Wasn't married yet, but
Yeah.
I want to get the context about the NCOs, and I do love my NCO, so I don't want to bypass that. And in this story, it includes Zach, and then I'm going to address kind of some of that how important our interpreters were. And so, I had 3 squad leaders, 3 sergeants, Decker, Iwatsuru, and Humphrey. And Decker was this...
Before you continue, Tom, one thing that I really love about your stories, and I think it's the embodiment of what good leadership is, the fact that you say their names in a positive light, whether they're fallen, whether they're injured, whether they just did their jobs. I think the fact that you still continue to give them credit in their shine, I fucking love that, because I think so often in this war on terror and what we've done in the last 15, 20 years, so many of the junior Marines and junior soldier, sailor, airmen, they get kind of overlooked by the overarching battles. But you don't do that. You make sure to make the sergeant, the corporal,
Helps
the lance
humanize
corporal,
it when everything gets,
like these are people.
Yeah, when we published the book, HarperCollins, I said, I've got to include everybody in first platoon in the acknowledgments. And they're like, is it really that important that we put every name of every Marine who was in first platoon and supported first platoon in the acknowledgments? And I said, yes, I wouldn't be here without them.
Yeah.
And so,
and before you continue again, I think that is a phenomenal example for young lieutenants, young ensign, young officers. If you respect the people that are working for you, they will fucking do anything for you.
My 3rd squad leader was Decker. He's from the Everglades, Florida. Like every kind of stereotype of Florida
man.
He is Florida man. If it had to be killed, if it had to be blown up, you sent 3rd squad led by Decker.
Yeah.
He named his maybe we could tell the story at the end, but he named his son Maximum Danger Decker.
Hell yeah.
And
that might be better than Gauge Machine that we heard today.
So Zach's all excited because he knows Deckers.
He never scared. He was dancing. He just went.
Oh,
he didn't care. There was IDs everywhere, but sometimes he didn't care about that. Just walking away.
How valuable is that for you as a commander?
So I just felt lucky that I had the guy who I knew, if it had to be blown up and destroyed tonight, you send 3rd squad with Decker, and they're going to kill everybody and blow everything up. Then I had my 2nd squad, Iwatsuru, who was really like the most squared away samurai. Like, he's the only squad that didn't take any casualties on any of his patrols. He was cautious but surgical. Mm-hmm. And then I had 1st platoon, which was
an adjective for a fucking sergeant of Marines, surgical.
And then I had 1st platoon, which was Humphrey. He was my main effort, and Humphrey was that, like, whatever you throw out there, like, Humphrey will get it done.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna quickly do the Decker story, then I'm gonna go to Humphrey, and then I'm going to answer your question. Sorry.
Love that.
And so
just a caveat off your own stories.
I don't use the C word
or behoove,
or the B word. So those are my 2 forbidden words. Because I've been in too many safety briefs with staff NCOs who misuse them. And
now wait just a goddamn minute.
Yes. So
for as great as NCOs are, they do have their damn flaws.
Well, he put the staff on it, so I feel a little bit more offense.
You should. So
wait, that might be the first time that staff NCOs have been roasted on this show.
Well, they need to be roasted.
Long overdue. Thank you.
You watch your fucking mouth.
No one loves the staff NCO more than me, but they are very roastable.
True. Yeah, that's fair.
So Decker, it was our last patrol. We were ripping out with 1-5. It was my last patrol in country. and 1-5, the new platoon commander, who's super talented dude, was going to go through this field that I said, like, don't go through this field. There's lots of IEDs out there. And he said, no, I'm going to go through the field. Don't advise it. The kids outside our post said there's a bunch of IEDs out there, so we don't go through that field. He said, well, you're setting a pattern. I'm going to go through that field. I said, it's your patrol. Don't recommend it. It was my last patrol, and I only had 3 Marines from 1st Platoon on that patrol. One was Sergeant Decker. And as we go across that field, it was Decker, Nykirk, the guy who I kind of talked about earlier, who popped the 40 mic into that window. Nykirk steps in the field, goes up in HME. I'm like 2 or 3 people behind him, and I see him go up in the cloud of smoke, which when you see people go up in the yellow smoke, it's a very bad feeling. I run up to Nykirk. He's standing on a 40-pound jug that's kind of partially blown open on top of a 105 shell, and he looks like he has a lot of HME on his face. Mm-hmm. This is a podcast where I feel like I could use some different references.
So HME, for those civilians listening, homemade explosives.
Yes. But I'm thinking when he just had HME kind of splattered on his face. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Which is typically built of like fucking laundry detergent, ammonium nitrate, like all kind. Time fuse is usually what it's, or maybe det cord.
I think Kate's picking up what I'm putting down, and you're kind of putting it more literal definition.
Yeah, you're putting it more. I get what you're saying. Yeah,
Kate's tracking. Okay. So I feel good. So we called EOD. EOD came out. They said this was a tripwire IED. If that 105 shell went off, like a couple people in front of him would be dead. A couple people behind him would be dead. Yeah. Nykirk is like, sir, can I go back? Just almost died. And I'm like, yeah, Nykirk, you can go back with EOD. And Decker's like, sir, I haven't met my son yet. He was born on this deployment. Can I go back? Because I feel like I'm going to die in this patrol. I'm like, no, Decker, because if shit goes sideways, I need at least one other person that I know who knows how to deal with bad stuff. And so he begrudgingly says, okay. EOD leaves. The engineer starts to sweep back towards us because he'd obviously missed an IED. And I said, tell the engineer to come back. And as he's coming back, he's in the middle of a field. He blows up.
And let me just tell you, as somebody that was my job as a dog handler, to go out in front. When you miss something, it happened to me once. Yeah. When you miss something, you feel like the worst person in the world. Luckily, whenever I missed something, no one died. It was just a Humvee went over the top of it, and it went off, and it was a very small, what would normally be like a toe pop, essentially. Yeah. And that's all that happened. But even that, you feel like you failed your entire mission. Mm-hmm. Like watching one person get injured for something that you, in your own estimation, feel like you should have stopped is incredibly guilt-inducing. And I wanted to ask you, before you continue on this, you say that you told him, I advise against it, and then it goes poorly. Did that affect your command for the rest of the deployment, or did you continue to trust your NCO's judgment? Where was that balance in trusting what your NCOs, who were the squad leaders or platoon leaders, versus you, who are in command and ultimately responsible for everything that your platoon does?
Yeah, I probably didn't frame that properly. This was my last patrol as a platoon commander in 3-5. We were done. This was 1-5 coming in. So this was
okay. So your left seat, right?
Me to the left seat, right seat to the platoon commander coming in. And so he's the one that didn't heed what I had to say.
Yeah, totally different.
It's interesting because he remembers the whole thing very differently.
Yeah.
Again, he's a Harvard graduate. He's much
Schueman
smarter.
told me to go out
See,
there.
we're talking shit about staff NCOs, and it's officers that are bickering back and forth, can't figure out what the fucking plan is.
For sure.
So the second bomb. Reeling us back in.
Yep. Thanks, Kate. And so
Kate's keeping us on track.
Yes. Come on.
Agreed that I know people. Again, being a combat engineer in Sengen was the most dangerous job in the world.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. 12 of the 13 engineers in Sengen were either amputees or killed from Kilo platoon, just from Kilo, that supported Kilo. We had one engineer squad, and 12 of those 13 were killed or amputees. I named my son after one of them, Arda Benagua, who's one of my engineers who lost his head, got his head blown off, who was 19 years old, and every day went outside that and walked point, he was number 12. And every day he went out, not knowing it wasn't a matter of if, but when. When you're number 12 and 11 of your squad mates are dead or missing a limb, it's not like I wonder what my fate is going to be walking through this minefield. It's knowing the consequence ahead of time and going anyways. And that's Arden Benagwa, this 19-year-old kid who never for a moment said, but sir, could someone else take this responsibility? Could someone else walk point on this patrol? He grabbed a mine detector to go sweep for IEDs that had non-metallic signatures. So a mine detector didn't alert you to the IED, and he went and walked point. And the day that Spivey stepped on that pressure plate and Mcleod was over it, I know he's a Paralympic athlete missing his arm. I know that he still very much lives with that he stepped on the pressure plate. But he walked over the charge. No signal from a plastic jug filled with homemade explosives. No signal from a pressure plate that's just a piece of wood with a carbon rod, right? So Decker says, I want to go home.
And do you mind if I give a little background there? Because like as a dog handler, this is extremely my shit. Like when you're talking about running point and things like that. Running point is legitimately terrifying. So if you're listening and you don't have any frame of reference for military actions or thing like that, running point is you are the front person in the platoon and the squad and the company that is moving forward. And as the point person, you're responsible for identifying anything that could be deemed as an immediate threat, an existential threat, or an outside threat, and including the route that you're going down. So for me, for example, when I ran point for 1st Recon Battalion in Fallujah, my entire responsibility was to make sure that not only the road was safe, but the 6 feet to the left and right was also safe. And there was times that I would go through that you would hear 3 or 4 hours later, a secondary platoon, a secondary company coming through, and they would hit an IED, and you would know the difference between engineers that were there with essentially metal detectors that were going through, and that was their only frame of reference was disturbed dirt and things like that, versus a dog handler that went on scent. So having dogs in your AO was a force multiplier in that area because we were able to identify homemade explosives, IEDs, weapons caches without any metal signatures. And that was the difference in Fallujah and a lot of areas that didn't have military working dogs. As somebody that went through, I cannot imagine the fear of doing that without a dog that has an unbelievable nose and is able
bravery.
And to take that, like to be an engineer in that position, going through Sengen at that time in the most dangerous roads in the world, is a level of bravery that I don't think the average person can really wrap their heads around. Because it's not a target that you can see. It's not a target that you can identify. It's a target that you know is there, and you absolutely have no idea when it's going to pop off.
Yeah, I mean, it's the idea of every time you put your foot down, like, it may not, that may be your last time.
Yeah, that might be the last time I have toes, or the last time I have legs.
And so, you go back to Vietnam, and the highest casualties were also combat engineers, right? Yeah. It's a historically very dangerous profession. I don't think anybody loves the combat engineer more than the grunt. For just a very short time, 1st Platoon had an MP with an MWD, right? We also had these IDD dogs.
Do you remember the name?
The dog's name was Back, and I think the guy's name was Corporal Roberts. And these... So you may not be familiar with the IDD program, but
I am very familiar. Yeah.
Those dogs were like mascots. Like
those dogs fucking sucked.
Okay.
I mean,
they
like to give you an example. So the IDD dogs were the infantry detector dogs, is what the program was called. In my field, we were 5812s, which falls underneath the MP field. Yeah. The 5812 dogs were unbelievable. Yeah. They were very, very good at what they were doing. The IDD dog is delusions of grandeur from the Department of Defense, because they would say that you could take the average infantryman, give them a dog, and
For
in 2 or 3 weeks,
Yeah.
they could be able to do the same thing as something that
I've
I
never
would
even
do.
done that job, and even I can tell you that's a
Yeah,
stupid
I
idea
know.
that doesn't work.
We
Whenever
have
I
them
was
too, and
there, when I was with
good.
First Recon, they're like, "Well, we have the option. We can get an IDD dog, and he's not going to be nearly as dick as big this guy is." Because they would tell me certain things, like for example, when we would go over a road in Karma, outside of Karma, which heavily laced IEDs. There was one night I found, I think, 13 IEDs in one night in Karma, and whenever we got there, the company commander, or no, the battalion commander, is a colonel, worked directly for General Mattis. He brought me to the side during an S2 brief, an intelligence brief. He brought me to the side and he said, "Corporal, do you think if we brought like a little bird in, that we could take you and your dog and we can go like 15 feet, 20 feet above the route, and you guys could tell us where the IEDs are, we can have EOD or route clearance go out and clear that?" And I legitimately thought, this dude might be mentally handicapped. Like, how can you be a colonel of Marines and think that that's what you're going to do? So you guys having to deal with IDD dogs who had big time delusions of grandeur, what their capabilities were, and they acted like you had to trust them the same level as you would somebody with a skill set like mine.
Yeah.
It put people at an unfair
quickly
advantage.
the IDD dogs became little platoon mascots.
Right. They were essentially
Great
all
for
black,
morale,
little
great
little
for
black
morale.
labs.
Like
They're
they're black
great.
labs.
Yeah.
Like who doesn't
Yeah.
love a goddamn golden retriever
Right.
Like
black
they're all
lab?
golden
Like, yeah.
retrievers. They were
Yeah.
fucking black labs.
But
I think-
Katie, back on track here.
Uh,
Katie tracks.
Sorry
a lot.
for telling
I'm
my
coming back
experience,
on-
Kate.
Okay.
Yeah. Hold on.
All that to say is that when back my
Sorry.
MWD dog, when my MWD dog cleared an area, I felt like I can go in that area.
Yes.
Yeah.
And because my MWD dog with his MP was very effective, MARSOC found out, and they took him from me.
Right.
And then they developed an entire program.
So I'm very salty
Yeah.
that I lost my MWD dog and
Right.
his MP handler because they were phenomenal. Yeah, Sergeant Decker turns to me and says, "Sir, I got to go home. I'm going to die." I said, "No, you got to stay." Engineer hits the IED. That's where we kind of departed on this. And when the engineer hits the IED, the Taliban opens up, multiple firing points, bullets everywhere. And the kids told us that there was 15 IEDs at least in that field. And we've now been in that field for about 5 minutes and hit 2 of them.
Yeah.
And one was a 105 shell with a 40-pound jug on it. And who is the person that I see sprinting into that field when everybody from 1-5, the new unit, is dicks in the dirt?
Yep.
Just, it's like, not to say that my unit did any better, right? On first contact, everybody's not great. Who do I see sprinting into the field?
Especially when you have a bunch of green Marines too.
Yeah.
Like if it's their first combat experience.
And it's Decker.
Yeah.
He's
Decker.
fucking running out there.
And I'm like, he's going to die, and he's never met his son. And the last thing I told him was, "You got to stay." And he said, "I want to meet my son." And I'm just like, "Decker, Decker," screaming at him, and he can't. I'm like, "Decker," and he finally turns, and I'm like, "I'm going to go. You're going to stay." And just to get to where he was, I had to cross this creek, canal, bullets everywhere. I was carrying an M32 that day.
So I'm not going to let you get away with this because that is so uncommon for a Marine officer to see a sergeant experiencing what is going to be legitimate life-threatening danger and to be like, I'm going to take this spot. Looking back years later, knowing what you do tactically now as a major and you have a lot more experience, was that a wise move?
Yeah, I mean, it was a wise move because I couldn't have lived with myself had he been hurt. And so, to me, like, that what is freeing as a leader is like physical courage is very easy as a lieutenant, you know, and because you don't have time to worry about yourself because these are your sons, your daughters. Your own personal safety is not your priority. It's the people that you love and care about. And so to me, it was moral courage, and this is already going very long, right? But moral courage is what is so challenging as an officer for me to do the right thing when no one's like that. Moral courage is hard. Physical courage is like, hey, this guy I love is about to go for sure die.
But Tom,
I'm going to go do that instead of him.
I also feel like that's a very simplistic way to look at it, and you're not a simplistic person. I know that tactically speaking, you know that having a sergeant run across a field and experiencing great personal danger is much different tactically and responsibly and a form of assault as having the commander go across the field. How was that balance for you, balancing what was tactically right, what was technically right, what was proficiently right, versus what was morally right? Did you feel that those ever intersected, and how did you deal with that conundrum?
Sure, there's probably some conflict there. That what people would say is that, you know, the officer shouldn't be the first person to the door, right?
Right. That's what I would say as a staff
when the
NCO.
officer
I would
takes
be
the-
fucking
yeah.
furious. Like all the things that you've said,
Yeah.
if I am your right-hand man when we're doing it, those things that you just said would piss me the fuck off.
Well, fortunately, I had Black Jesus, who was my platoon sergeant, Staff Sergeant Tim Henley, and you couldn't kill him. And he'd been blown up. He'd been shot in Fallujah and blown up in Sangin. And he was my guy, and he was going to support me no matter what, and he knew how I operated. And he knew that I was going to go to the point of friction, and that there would be no convincing me otherwise.
I'd go so far as to say that all the things that Chaps just asked you, none of that entered your mind. You just saw your NCO out there, and you're like, I'm going to go get it.
Yeah,
Correct.
doing the right thing as a leader.
Maybe you reflect on it now and think about it and think through it and how, you know, things.
Yeah, Monday morning quarterbacking things makes it completely different, especially when you're talking about the commander on the ground doing something inherently dangerous versus...
Those are not the things that I Monday morning quarterback, right? There are Marines... Where Artem Benago was killed and subsequently Jason Pito was blown up in that explosion as well, and he died a couple of days later at Walter Reed. Like, should they have been in that building? I was on that patrol. They shouldn't have been in that building. Those are those things. You know, Tevin and Wynn was killed, and I didn't have the jammers on us during that patrol. These are the things that I will forever live with and have to reconcile.
But I just want to clarify that jammers, what he's talking about there is electronic jammers. So back in the day,
they stop IEDs from going off. Sometimes they can stop
would
the
stop
signal.
the electric transmission of anything that could cause a triggering device. So whenever you had the jammers in place, you felt a little bit more comfortable going in certain areas.
And then singing, it was all pressure plate IEDs. The jammers never hardly worked, but ultimately on December 28th, the first time we ever experienced a remote control ID. And so those are the kind of things I had to live with. I ran out to that Marine who was blown up in the middle of the field, that engineer, and I was carrying the Mark 32. And as every time I took a step into that field, I thought for sure, I'm dead. I said, I remember my cadence running through that field. I found the corpsman from 1-5. I said, you're going to follow me.
Fuck. Is that the cadence? Is that?
That's basically it,
Yeah.
It was motherfucker.
Yeah. Okay.
Motherfucker.
I thought there's 0% chance I get to him with my legs.
Yeah.
Like best case scenario, no legs. Probable scenario, dead. Got to him, and because there's this tripwire IDs in this field. That was the first ID that we had, was a tripwire ID. We'd never experienced tripwire IDs. I'm like, oh well. So I'm high kneeing all my way out, motherfucker.
And I think what people don't realize that haven't been in that position, it's almost weird, right? Like where you know that it's a possibility, but you're almost like, I gotta fucking do this. Like,
it wasn't a possibility. It was the probability at that time. I thought there is no way. We've been in this field for 5 minutes. There is no way I get to that guy. But what are you going to do? You're not going to fucking leave him out there.
Yeah.
And so I got out there. I threw the corpsman in this big crater. He started to patch that guy up. I had an M32, which I had been carrying for like a month, and I was super. It's a six-shooter grenade launcher. And so I was like,
I didn't know it was a real weapon when I first got to Fallujah.
Yeah.
When somebody showed it to me, I was like, that shit's real? I thought it was fake.
Yeah.
So I'd been waiting to shoot somebody with it, and I was like, this is now a great opportunity to
It's
shoot people
basically
with
just
it.
a revolver with grenades.
Yes. So who wants 6-piece nug? Who wants 6-piece nug? Everybody gets 6-piece nug, right?
The whole squad gets a 6-piece nug.
And Taliban said, we don't want any more nuggets. Thank you. Taliban left or was dead. And then on the way back, we're carrying the engineer back with the doc. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to for sure. It's good that we got this guy, but we're going to die on our way back. That was Sergeant Decker, Sergeant Humphrey on November 9th. And this, Zach was here, and this is kind of one of the more, this is in the book. One of my Marines had been injured. We went out with a quick reaction force. We go to help alleviate some pressure off the squad of the casualty. And we get the squad of the casualty back to the base. And then I say, okay, let's break down. Let's go back. The rear of the patrol comes under heavy fire. I'm running back to the rear of the patrol. Zach's always kind of with me. And as I get to my squad leader, Sergeant Humphrey, he steps on the ID and the pressure plate and the charger right on top of one another. So my platoon sergeant is right behind him. I'm right in front of him, and we get blown up. And I'm unconscious for a little while. First thing I see is Zach's kind of over me.
And that's where you receive the Purple Heart Medal, right?
Correct. So Zach's already in the fight, covering me. I see my Corporal Leahy, my first team leader, has already assumed command of the squad, which I always say is, what's the greatest testament of a leader is how your people act in your absence. And the idea that seamlessly, Corporal Leahy took Sergeant Humphrey's squad. I will always say that is Sergeant Humphrey's greatest testament, is that he had already called in the medevac, he'd already set security, and he did that all on his own initiative, and then he led that squad for the remainder of the deployment. I look down my platoon sergeant.
And let me just say, as a staff NCO of Marines, that shit is exactly what you train for months on months, is the seamless transition of responsibility. Because as an NCO, as a staff NCO, you never have command. Like, that's Tom, that's Cons that have commands. But having the ability to know what your chain of authority is and who's going to step up in your absence, and identifying those people and having them do it seamlessly, for me as a staff NCO, you've done exactly what your job is, and it sounds like that sergeant did it in that moment.
Yeah, Humphrey is my hero for a lot of reasons, and I see my platoon sergeant. He's bleeding out the ears. I see my squad leader, whom is a person. He's really one of my best friends at that point. He's missing one leg below the knee, and then his other leg, he's got from his knee to the top of his boot, there's no muscle, fat, or skin or tissue. It's just a bone. And he's saying, as every amputee, lower amputee says, can I reproduce? Once you assure someone they can reproduce, he immediately turns to saying, I'm sorry. And as we carried this Marine off the battlefield, I was at the head of his stretcher. He kept turning and looking up to me and saying, sir, I know I'm heavy. You could put me down. Now, he was a little bit out of BCP, a little bit out of height and weight standards.
Sometimes those guys are the best.
Internalized fucking fat body.
Yes. So he wasn't he wasn't wrong. Wow. He was, but I just kept saying, like, Humphrey, we're not going to put you down.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, sir. Like, I know I'm heavy. Just you guys take a break. And here's a Marine who would die in flight and need to be resuscitated. And, this book is called Always Faithful. And it's this idea of Semper Fidelis, this idea of in the moments preceding your death, not figurative, but literally the moments before you die, you turn to your friends and you say, I'm heavy. You put me down, take a break. And this is what Humphrey's saying. He's got to be resuscitated twice in flight to Bastion, to Leatherneck. And he's not thinking about himself. It's Sergeant Ian Tawney, who in his final Lima Company squad leader, who in his final moments, his last words were, is everybody okay? And every fucking time I think about that, Sergeant Ian Tawney, But could you imagine the last words you say before you die when you've been blown up by ID? Is everybody okay?
No.
Sergeant Antoni knows he's going to die. And he's looking at his squad and says, is everybody okay? Sergeant Humphrey knows he's about to die and says, put down my stretcher, take a break. I know you guys need a rest. This is the idea of Always Faithful. This is the idea of Semper Fidelis. And this is partly why we wrote this book, partly obviously because of the title. And so, Cons, you asked me about NCOs. I have to talk about NCOs because I fucking love my NCOs.
Absolutely.
And I can't not.
And that comes through in your stories.
If you give me an opportunity to talk about NCOs, I have to take that.
So
I want to talk about Zach.
Yeah, so I wanted to too. I only have a little bit of time. Full disclosure, my son is running around upstairs and it's getting late, and he's so I'm like, oh no, I want to ask. But I think like we've established like what the scene in Sangin was.
Yeah.
You guys didn't, as the Marines, didn't really have an option. You got sent where you got sent.
Yep.
You couldn't say no thanks.
Yep.
You were there.
Yep.
Zach, you didn't have to be there. And once you got there and saw what it was like, you did not have to stay. Right? Your contract didn't say you have to stay and keep going outside the wire.
Stay, yeah.
You every time, just as the Marines knew they could die at their next step, it was the exact same for you. You were his shadow, like you were right next to him the entire time, and that goes beyond like, oh, this paycheck I'm getting. You were as much a part of the brotherhood as every single one of these guys. You were their family. You became their family.
Exactly.
Was that something instant? Because if, in all honesty, if I was you, after the first patrol, I'd have been like, all right, no thanks. I'll see you later. I'll
find another job.
And they probably would have. The demand was so high. You could have been sent somewhere else. Like, what made you stay in Sangin with these guys?
Yeah, as Major Schueman, he's the whiteness. A lot of the interpreters come to Sangin and they're crying. They just crying and they say, we are quit. We're not going to.
Yep.
They did one patrol or they don't go to outside to the patrol.
Yeah.
When I come on my first night, and one of our COC, he come and he talked to us, and we was 3 guys when we go to the increment, pops in Sangin. I was the increment, and the PCO told me to, one of you guys gonna stay here with the first platoon, and the other 2 they going to different places. That's the outpost. Or they just stay in the post, not going to the patrol. But the guy who's staying here, he gonna go to patrol. I said,
I already got blown up in Korengal, so I'll stay. It's
Yeah,
fine.
I like how
I've already been blown
interpreters
up.
just act like, oh, it's no fucking biggie.
And, some of the guys they before me, the guys that told me the stories, they're crying.
And who can blame them, right?
That's why we come when you want to serve, like for your country, and these guys, they are Americans, they're Marines. They come from long way here for our country, for the not only our country or not a U.S. or not a nation. This is for the peace of whole world. They come here to fight against the terrorists or the enemy. And why do I not?
I think
why
that's
I accept that risk. To go to
you knew you could die.
Yeah.
I think that's
Very
amazing.
Everybody could die.
Yep.
But for their nations, for their people, for their country. This is this sacrifications. Everybody have to do it.
Yeah.
Completely
That's
agree.
why I accept it.
That's
to
awesome.
go to
I've
the
actually
race.
never heard an interpreter say it like that before, and I think that's beautiful, that you saw your mission as so much greater than yourself, but you saw it as an opportunity to serve your country and give back to your country, to the world, as you put it, and I think that's unbelievably selfless of you.
Yeah, I think you've done a testament. I love the fact that you're here, like you live in my city now. Like Zach and I live in the same town. He lives 5 minutes away from me. Huebner is the road that that's where I go to fucking Lowe's. That's where I go to HEB. All that shit is right where he lives. So
Yeah.
The fact that you're
we're
there.
very close to HAB.
Yeah, we're right,
Yeah.
and you love HEB, right? You
Yeah.
gotta love it.
Exactly.
I think it's amazing that
Amazing,
that
very
people
amazing.
like you, and not just you, but I've noticed around that area, Huebner area, there's a
Exactly.
bunch of people from Afghanistan
Yeah,
who are
exactly.
interpreters there. I told a story on ZBT right after the refugees and the people from Afghanistan started to come to the San Antonio area.
Yeah.
And my wife and I brought a bunch of materials and things like that we had collected from people in our church to bring. And there was a group of Afghan children who were playing cricket out in front of their apartment. And I told my wife, I was like, I think that might be the first time cricket has ever been played in San Antonio.
Yeah.
But the look of happiness that they were playing it in San Antonio after all the things that they had been through was just absolutely beautiful. And I told Tom when he was like, Zach's going to San Antonio, I was like, this is a place where people are going to love you. Like, San
Exactly.
Antonio is a welcoming melting pot. And I'm so glad that you're not just like an interpreter that worked with Tom. You're my neighbor.
Thank you, sir.
And I love that fact that you went from being an interpreter to being somebody who shares the same city as me, and you're my neighbor now.
And
Exactly.
Always Faithful, the book tells the story of how that came to be. It was not an easy road. And I think one of the remarkable things is that this was 2010. And you became like a brother to them. I mean, he had a weapon, right? You had a weapon and you...
We are not allowed,
But you... Right. And so...
Allowed, yeah.
Okay.
if somebody from our team is getting into trouble
Yeah.
or besieged or from enemy, we take care of it, you know.
You were
We
a
had-
brother, just like you're a
brothers.
brother with them.
we were not allowed to have weapons because we were not soldiers. We was just interpreters.
Well, that's...
That's why I pick up the weapons
Yeah.
for protection, for our protection, and also for our boys, for our team. I mean,
Yeah.
Yes.
You
And
know?
that's why you were the first person
Yeah.
when you woke up on the ground, like
Yep.
you were there and you were
Yep.
there to look out for
Exactly.
him, and you knew that you could
Exactly.
lose your life. And I think that bond is so strong. People forget, like, that was over 10 years ago, and fast forward to last year, the U.S. is leaving Afghanistan. I mean, we all know the insanity that was the withdrawal. How did you two reconnect again, or for 10 years had you kept in touch, or?
Yep.
And obviously, the book tells that story the best.
We don't really have any save rounds or alibis today, but we're going to keep the interview going because that's going to be going by Cross Country Mortgage. If you haven't bought a house yet, or if you're trying to use your GI Bill, the best people to go with is Cross Country Mortgage. All kinds of interest rates in different places all over the joint. With the Fed increasing interest rates all over the place, you need to make sure that you have a reliable mortgage company. If you're going to use your GI Bill, which you should because it's an entitlement, not something you're just given. It's an entitlement. You're entitled to it because you fucking earned it. Make sure you go with Cross Country Mortgage because when you're about to face the intimidating process of buying a home, you need to make sure that you get the best support from the most qualified people available. That's Cross Country Mortgage has a team of experts that are dedicated to helping you accomplish that mission in buying a home. Cross Country Mortgage has a team of loan officers dedicated to getting you the best possible loan terms, so you're not going to be like one of those fucking boots that's standing outside with a 1997 Mustang and you're paying 31% interest. They're not going to allow you to do that. Cross Country Mortgage is ready to guide you through the home buying process and is making it as painless as absolutely possible. They're dedicated to getting you the mission accomplished, and that's being in your own home that's beautiful. It's the exact one that you want at the time you want for the price you want. Go to crosscountrymortgage.com/barstool so Cross Country Mortgage can take care of you through the buying process. And you need to make sure that it's an equal housing opportunity. Cross Country Mortgage LLC, NMLS 3029. All loans are subject to underwriting approval. Again, go to NMLSconsumeraccess.org. Go with consumer or crosscountrymortgage.com.
So the book is Always Faithful. Am I correct in saying that Always Faithful may be a movie?
Yeah, so Bob Rodat, who wrote Saving Private Ryan
Some of you have heard of it, maybe.
and The Patriot.
And The Patriot. Okay. Mel Gibson, Tom Hanks,
Yeah.
a couple of no names. Go ahead.
He wrote the screenplay for the movie. So We've got some great producers. Got a phenomenal screen. The screenplay was actually done before the book.
Okay.
So it's out, and it's and I think there's some pretty talented directors who are interested in directing it. So, yeah, we hope the movie gets made.
Yeah,
Presented by Barstool Sports, or
Yeah, go ahead.
no, but I mean, I think it's always so rewarding for me when I read a good book and I finish the book and I'm like, man, I hope they make this as a movie because I want to see it like play out more than what it just did in my head and more than the way you just described those stories. I want to hear about all those other stories. So, who is going to play you when the movie gets made?
Yeah. So the interesting, every time someone hears,
I think Tom Middleton for Tom.
I don't know who Tom Middleton is.
That's good, right?
But
It could work.
So every time someone hears the story, especially the story about when you get to chapter like 18, 19, 20, towards the end of the book, 17, 18, 19, 20, it's captivating. It's captivating because it has all the drama, the tension.
I'd say it's very good before chapter 8. You don't have to struggle through some bullshit before
You don't, have
chapter
to get
18.
you don't have to labor through 17 chapters.
It's all good, but after
Thanks, and that's where the evacuation piece starts. That's where the rescue piece starts, and we wish. I always say that I wish it was boring. I wish there was no book.
You wish it was just an easy 1, 2, 3.
And that's
Cool.
the reason why I wanted to start with what 3-5 was and where you went, and you're back there now. But before we continue down there, I want to make it clear to the listener and the watchers on YouTube and things like that, we're not going into the meat of the book. I want people to listen knowing this story and knowing some background about what happens before they go in, because I think that sets the scene for what your book is about.
Yeah,
like,
it's not a war book. I mean, there's 2 chapters about singing. It's a story about friendship. It's a story about keeping promises. Story about family, and so, but by the end of the book, I think you care about Zach.
Yeah.
And so
I was so happy to
And
see
rightfully
him.
so.
Like, I feel like I've done so many adjacent stories, and I've talked to you a ton. So Zach, to finally see you in the flesh has been fantastic, and knowing that you live in the same city as me is great. And you've been here essentially 9 months now, a little bit over 9 months probably. What's your first impressions of San Antonio and Texas? How are you feeling living here now? I have to imagine it's just an incredibly different life.
Yeah, it's very different. San Antonio is a good place. I like it. And also we
Too
have
hot.
Too hot.
Yeah.
Though. We have a lot of Afghan people. We have Afghan People Society called Afghan Brothers. And we have mosque. We go to pray, and they keep, like all Afghan, they keep their own culture, and nobody disturbing us. Just nice people living around us and helping us. It's very good. I like it, and we are very excited.
That's awesome. You have your own community here.
Yep,
That's
exactly.
fantastic.
That's fantastic.
They help each other. If someone have a problem, they have a Facebook group, and they just posting in there. They help each other, and very good place.
And I've seen so much of that happen with some of the work that I've done with some of the other groups that are coming into San Antonio and things like that. I'm so thrilled for both of you guys. Tom, I know this has been a long time coming for you. Zach, I can imagine how emotionally invested you've been over the last year, and some of the things that are still going on, because obviously you're here, your immediate family is in San Antonio, but a great majority of your family is back home in Afghanistan, and seeing the things that they're going through and some of the changes that have gone in reverse. Watching the news here from San Antonio, how has that been for you, watching what's going on in Afghanistan now, and what would you like to see happen in Afghanistan in the future?
Yeah, we are watching the medias, and it's a very, very critical situation right now in Afghanistan. People just get dying from poverty, no jobs, no food, no, like even just a poor side health, no doctors. Everything is just incredibly bad, and no school for the kids, for the girls, and people just they're 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 wondering what to do. Some of the people they are ready to kill themselves because of poverty, because of no jobs, because of no good government.
Mm.
If anybody kill anybody, nobody asks who they are and who did it, because of the the ruling of Taliban. They have nothing.
And I think what Zach is saying there is how we'll close out essentially is that what Tom and Zach, what they went through in Afghanistan and how they're feeling now watching after a year of what's taken place. I firmly believe that what America and what our government is doing, and we could put Tom off because he's still an active duty officer, so this is just me talking. What we're doing now as the American government for people that have worked with us, worked beside us, bled beside us, the fact that we are nearly a year after the final withdrawal from Afghanistan, and we're still dealing with hundreds of thousands of people who deserve to come here. The fact that we can continue with American politics, American ideals, American existentialism, and things like that, and not focus on the partners who bled beside us every single step of the way, oftentimes enduring much more than we did. We would go over for a year, 14 months, 16 months at a maximum. There was people that were interpreters in Iraq and Afghanistan that served for 2-3 years straight without any type of relief. These people being left behind by a government that promised them that they would accept them here and accept them as Americans is absolutely bullshit. We need to make sure that us as veterans, those of us that aren't on active duty like me, Cons, and Kate, that we continue to hold our government's feet to the fire. It's incredibly important that every person who sacrificed immensely, like Zach and his family did, be treated with utmost respect and the dignity that they deserve. The title of interpreter alone is not enough. These people were warriors who were willing to put themselves in the same exact dangerous positions that we were for months on end. We have to do what's right for them. If not, we have completely abdicated our responsibility and our moral authority on the world. Thanks so much for joining. I appreciate Zach. I appreciate what you did for the United States of America and standing beside us. Tom, obviously, I love you and what you are for Marines. I think that oftentimes my greatest regret in life is that my personal fuck-ups caused or contributed to the deaths of Marines by not confronting PTSD and traumatic brain injury early enough. I love Marines with everything that I have. I am thankful that men like Tom carry the colors. Thank you.
Semper Fi. We love you too.
Thank you.
Sound the retreat.